And to nobody's surprise, Spider-Man 2 reviews score it nothing short of amazing. As I'm sure many of you have seen or heard, this is yet another banger from Insomniac that makes you really appreciate just how great 2023 has been for gamers everywhere. It's hard to believe we had such a great year with back-to-back great releases from Jedi Survivor, Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, and now finally Marvel Spider-Man 2. And while there are over 130 reviews of the game at the time being, I thought we went over the most common points and criticism, as there are, in my humble opinion, some valid things to say about this overall extremely fun game. We saw both IGN and GameSpot becoming more and more critical, but I think even from these few outliers, the critic score right now is pretty telling. Spider-Man 2 is an insanely fun game that's absolutely worth every penny. But if you're somehow still on the fence about it or just want to save a few pennies, you can totally still enter my giveaway for 2 copies on the PlayStation 5. Winners will be announced before Friday, and all you have to do to enter is to make sure you smash that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and comment below if you're also excited for launch day. But to kick things off, the overall review impressions noted that the game's been very successful into building upon the elements that made the original 2018 and the follow-up Miles Morales standalone so fun. Everything from the web swinging mechanics and especially the combat, even the story, have gone through a lot of improvements and new additions while still feeling very much familiar to what we've been used to. In fact, the very first re-entry moment in the game is a refresher of your abilities, plus a few new moves to make you remember and immediately jump into the new groove. However, there were also a few, and understandably so, critical remarks of less successful elements, such as boring puzzles and repetitive filler open-world content that didn't evolve much since 2018. But overall, even the most critical reviewer praised its intricate and cinematic main narrative for its exploration of both comical and heavy themes such as loneliness and isolation, but also the showing of the human side of villains, overall contributing to a very engaging storyline, both visually and emotionally. IGN, for example, despite being overall more critical, noted how this is the best written story in Insomniac's series, giving plenty of attention to every member of its main cast, including their daily struggles. Equally, GameSpot noted that the story is the true star of the game, building heavily on character development and revitalizing iconic villains, and even in particular Kraven and Venom, despite the later tweaked backstories. The 18 or so hour long narrative definitely seems to be one of the key highlights of the game, and Eurogamer, for example, even notes that the Venom storyline plays a significant role in it, and it's been adapted in a fantastic and surprising way. Personally, the Venom plot was my biggest fear, and I'm glad to hear all of that. From the looks of it, it seems that Insomniac definitely did it justice. Also, in regards to the story, it's still Peter's story for the most part, as he takes the center stage in the main plot, with most of it focusing on him. Thank God, but Miles still gets his own moments, actually quite a few of them, but even more so are reserved for him via side missions. These side missions were praised to be very high in quality, so to me that sounds like a win-win situation. However, one particular point of complaint was the open world and side content, with even the most positive of reviews such as VGC that calls it the greatest superhero video game of all time, complaining about Insomniac introducing cool features for just a mission or two, only to completely drop them off and never bring them back right after. It's also been noted that while the game is bigger, it's not necessarily better, as most of the side content and especially the puzzles are just checklists of repetitive activities that almost makes the game somewhat stuck in the past. There was even a comparison with the old Arkham series that even those years back still managed to make like the overall open world encounters a lot more engaging, providing that example with the man-bat jump scares. So I believe that that's just something that shows you how well those games hold up, but obviously Insomniac could have done a little bit more on that part too. Outlets like Eurogamer, on the other hand, note that despite the game's familiar, simple, and sometimes cluttered nature, there's an overabundance of minigames, close to a dozen in fact, that provide a good enough break from the serious aspects of the game. And I mean, this is going to boil down to the player preference and likely even the moment they play in. Sometimes, for example, I just want to put my brain on autopilot and have some mindless fun, testing out abilities and punching at bad guys. I don't always want to be super focused and engaged on beating the next section of the game to progress. So having these moments, a bit of like just breathing room, definitely seem like better to me, but I would also love to know your opinion down below. Generally, it's been accepted though that there's more side content in the game than ever, which also comes in the form of those side missions with Miles I was talking about, but Peter of course also has a lot of them too. Another praise brought to the game was the fact that pulling your visor to see nearby events and missions feels much better than before, because now you don't have to look at icons on the minimap and you kinda see it all in front of you. Almost reminds me a bit of Ghost of Tsushima. Another aspect that's been highly praised is just how fun the game is to play, and that's also in part because of the improved traversal mechanics. Easy Allies notes that the core mechanics from the previous two games remain uncompromised, with the addition of new ones such as the web wings for traversal and the parry mechanics for combat. The addition of web wings, especially as noted by Eurogamer, allows for more intuitive travel around the city, and players can even swap between Spider-Man and their unique abilities at any time. Equally, unlocking fast travel is now only done once completing the challenge track in the specific district, of which there are going to be 14 in total, with plenty of activities, which was almost all universally praised as a decision, since traversal on its own is so much better than just using fast travel, and that's because it just gives you so fast access to every corner of the city in almost no time. Taking advantage of the wind tunnels and gusts of air provides the most exhilarating, fun new way to traverse that only becomes better as you combine it with a slightly faster web slinging mechanic and amazing slingshot ability that lets you launch really far up. Moving on though, it seems that one aspect that almost every reviewer agrees with is that while the combat is indeed a big step up too, stealth somehow is even less of a focus than in the previous games, which I found to be particularly odd given how there are even new tools, like for example the web line that focus a lot more on stealth, and even the gameplay presentations from before focused on this aspect of the gameplay too. So reviewers actually, most of them noted that the game does offer you most of these, especially in the main story. However, it prefers to immediately just have you jump straight into open combat. Peter's symbiotic powers that he gets not too far off in the game make a huge impact and let him match the level of satisfaction that are provided by Miles' electric powers. He kinda seems to be fitting that brawler kind of role, but of course there are many more mechanics in there that focus on even more AoE than ever before. Fights have also been made slightly more engaging and a little bit more strategic, as there is a greater enemy variety. So instead of just the handful of types that we had before, we now have a lot more, and we even have to take into consideration different enemy weaknesses and strengths. So there are enemies that can be more vulnerable to electric or symbiote powers. This is going to be a level of complexity that is very welcomed, as it kinda makes you consider a bit more which powers or Spider-Man are best for the job ahead. Also, going off that stealth focus, Insomniac seems to have doubled down on the MJ mission moments, which quite a few fans were not impressed by in the previous game in 2018, myself included. So here is where it's kinda like a mixed bag, just like before. Some outlets and reviewers noted how playing as her after the action-packed sections with the two Spideys feels a bit like a drag, as obviously she doesn't have any powers and her moments are obviously a lot slower. On the other hand, her kit also gets upgraded, as she can now use weapons, she has enemy takedowns, even ways to distract them and such. But even so, it never adds up to more than just simple stealth missions with little added gameplay and with the most basic of third-person combat. So again, both stealth and MJ's moments are still some of the game's biggest drawbacks from the looks of it. I myself still praise Insomniac for at least trying to give her a role, but it's probably going to be the sloggiest portion of the game for me. And speaking of extra time, for other characters, it was noted, though without specifically mentioning examples, that Insomniac has many more bosses up their sleeves in the full game. A major step up has been made here too, with the boss battles being noticeably better than the previous games. almost every reviewer pointed out that these fights really put your skills to the test and how it already starts on a strong note quite early on. Dodges and parries become even more important than ever, but probably even more so is using your environment at your own advantage. So many things scattered around that you can use at your own benefit to help in combat. And it only becomes crazier as the game goes on, so I'm really happy to hear that. Some of the boss fights in the 2018 installments were kind of lackluster for me personally. I found that there was a great lack of really great fights in that game. Maybe it was just me, but I'm glad that this is a big step up in the sequel. Now, the final aspect that's been discussed is performance. From a technical point of view, this is yet another triumph on the studio's part, with stunning visuals and great performance. IGN notes that the game was completely locked at 60 FPS in performance mode, and even in that mode, the game looked visually stunning. I myself always choose performance mode in these games because of the 60 frames, so I'm more than excited for that. Digital Foundry, who calls it the next big leap for PlayStation 5, praises the attention to detail, even giving some great examples, noting for example how the game features an actual suspension system for vehicles, making them behave more realistically when Spider-Man lands on them. Additionally, with the overall world density being boosted to a great level, high levels of vegetation and attention to detail, it gives the impression of a more lively and inhabited city with more geometric detail and material variety. Also, the loading times are extremely fast as you might have expected, and ray-traced reflections have been enhanced. Overall, really liking that 91 score on Metacritic right now. I mean, really, Insomniac deserves it. They've been delivering nothing short but high quality over the years, and they've actually done it very quickly, all things considered. 3 big games already in just a few years. That's really big, and we have so much more from them. So this is pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.